I wouldn't say he's the pillar of righteousness in the family because he's also like a murderous vampire, but he's like the least murderous and crazy of them all.
Okay, so let's talk about some examples then from TV shows, because I know that there are several, and these might be examples that some of our viewers are more familiar with if they haven't read some of these books.
Yeah.
So the first one you brought up was Vampire Diaries. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Diaries, definitely. And then the spin-off, the originals. And now there's a new spin-off called Legacies, but I haven't really, I don't know, I got bored with it. So, but in the Vampire Diaries, there's two vampire brothers, Stefan and Damon Salvatore. And they are the epitome of the brooding YA character. I mean, they're not teenagers, they're God knows how old, but they're very secretive, and I keep saying introspective, but it's probably not the word I'm looking for, but they're very just brooding. That's a very good word. Brooding is a very good word. It sort of describes, they're just so
like withdrawn, kind of.
Yeah, withdrawn. And there's this allure, the main character Elena is human girl. She's like immediately smitten with Stefan. And you move through the series, she discovers he's a vampire and is totally okay with that. And then, they set up this dichotomy between the brothers where one is supposed to be good and one is supposed to be bad, but that's a really gray area there. And then Damon is like this super brooding hero through the entire series, like 8, 9 seasons, I'm not sure, but he is the borderline, I don't even know, he's like a sociopath in the beginning. And how they make him somewhat redeemable by like illuminating his past, but I mean, they've both had really messed up pasts. But then you move into the originals, which is a spin-off of the Vampire Diaries, which follows the Michelson family, who are the original vampires. And Klaus Michelson is both, like when we were talking earlier, I said he's a hero to some people and a villain to others. He's this sadistic, bloodthirsty vampire, but he also has this loyalty to his family. I mean, he'll stab his family in the heart with a stake in a minute, like if they cross him. But at the same time, like, he's the only one allowed to do that. So he is to me, like of all the TV shows I've watched, like the epic brooding hero, because he's always saving the day, but he's always like quiet and reserved, and he almost talks like Batman through the entire series, like this very deep monotone, everything is grave and serious, and if I ever smiled it might shatter my face kind of hero, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does.
So that was the first TV show that came to mind for me when we were talking about brooding heroes for TV shows.
Yeah, I've watched like at least the first season of that show, so I know a little bit about the characters, and yeah, I would agree with your assessment.
His brother Elijah is also very brooding, but he's I wouldn't say he's the pillar of righteousness in the family because he's also like a murderous vampire, but he's like the least murderous and crazy of them all. I don't know if you can make a vampire be not a villain, but yeah, that whole family was pretty broody. And then you were talking about because I think you find a lot of brooding heroes tend to be in like sci-fi and fantasy when they're actually literally.
1 second, let me mute that.
Yeah. Oops.
Sorry.
Because there's the stakes are higher, so we identify a hero a lot easier if they're in a situation where they actually literally have to save the planet. But there's other types of heroes too, like you were talking about Hart of Dixie.
Yeah. So I think this is a good example of the fact that usually it's a tragic backstory that makes the hero a brooding hero, regardless of the genre. And then when you combine that tragic backstory with like, in the case of Hart of Dixie, ongoing disadvantages. So in the Heart of Dixie, Wade, that's his name, right? He views himself, at least, as at a disadvantage in pursuing the girl that he's falling in love with. So he doesn't feel like he's good enough for her. He sees that she's interested in someone else that he feels is better than him. And so he's just constantly beating himself up over the course of the series and actually kind of sabotaging his own chances with her, even when she does begin to be interested in him. And so he's a really good example of a brooding hero outside the fantasy genre, because he still has those shared qualities of like sympathetic backstory, a relatable struggle, but it's not a like, you know, I'm the prophesied hero who has to go save the world. It's just the way he views himself, which I think is, you know, is very realistic and relatable, but definitely still a brooding hero example.
Because he was a hero in the sense that really the hero of his own story, because of everything that he had to overcome to, totally spoiler alert, to, you know, get to where he was by the end of the series. Yeah, I mean, he kind of was the hero of his own story. He went from feeling like he was nothing to accomplishing his ultimate goal by the end of the series, which was, I don't know. I need to rewatch that series. It was good.
Yeah, it was a good series.
Actually, another TV show that we didn't talk about before when we were prepping. Did you ever see Revenge?
No.
With Emily, I can't remember her name. Basically, her entire life is about seeking revenge for her father being set up for a terrorist act. And he spent all his time in jail. She suffered through it and out of foster care and stuff like that. She even went to juvenile for imprisonment for a while for some stuff. But once she figures out that her dad actually didn't do what he went to jail for, which I think was like taking down an airline flight or something like that, I can't remember off the top of my head. She sort of flips this switch and she goes through all this training. She becomes this epic fighter. She's good with weapons, and she has this board of people who she's going to take out. Not necessarily kill, but she's going to completely ruin their lives. And she is very, very affected, obviously, because now her entire life is about taking these people out. Everything she does all day, every day is plotting. And it takes years to do all this. But through the whole thing, I mean, like, she's so angsty and brooding and angry. But as the series progresses, she becomes even more sympathetic, because you're like, yeah, that would probably drive me to want to ruin 30 people's lives forever, too. So that's a really good example for a TV show, too. But if you haven't watched it, watch it. I think it's on Amazon. It's really
I haven't watched that one. I just realized a couple other examples while you were talking. I think this is a funny example, but I think Samson from the Bible is a really great example of a brooding hero as well. We were reading through his story with the kids recently, and when you said that you could understand how someone could want to like destroy 30 people's lives, he literally, whenever he's betrayed by the people who like go to his girlfriend and trick her or force her into tricking him, he literally goes and like murders 30 people, because he had made a bargain with them with this riddle, and it was like, we'll give you 30 pieces of clothing if you know, if we can't solve the riddle, but if we do, then you owe us or whatever. So they solve the riddle, and so he goes and kills all 30 of them and takes their clothes and then takes it to the people and is like, here's the 30 pieces of clothes for the riddle you solved because you cheated, right? So and he does lots of things like that through the course of his story. So it's interesting because he's
in his death scene.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't go alone. He takes everybody.
Yeah.
You know,
and then the other thing I was thinking about that I don't know why this didn't occur to me before, but is like comic superheroes, like comic book superheroes.
Yeah.
Batman is definitely a brooding hero. And then I was thinking about the Flash, which I haven't read the Flash comics much, but like at least the TV show, the Flash, I've watched. He's not. It's interesting because he has a similar backstory to Batman in the sense that like he essentially lost both his parents. It was in a different way. His mother was killed. His dad was imprisoned for her murder. But rather than go completely brooding like Batman, he doesn't. He goes a different way. And it's not until later in the TV series that he starts brooding for other reasons, or like really kind of gets caught in the loop of being angry about what's happened to him, and starts brooding. But it's interesting because even with a similar backstory, the two character reactions initially are very different. Their motivations are very different. But Batman is definitely a brooding hero. And remains that way. Never becomes unbrooding.
The Arrow. Did you watch the
Yes.
He was a brooding hero too.
Yes, he was.
And I didn't watch the last couple seasons because I don't know, I just after a while I'll lose interest in TV shows if they last more than a couple seasons. But yeah, he was really broody from in the first 2 seasons, as far as I remember. Angsty in the way that, I think almost every superhero has some sort of, well, I guess not every superhero is brooding, but they do have an angsty backstory almost always.
It's interesting.
Has his moments.
Yeah, the DC characters are interesting because it's almost like a night and day difference. Like Batman is super brooding, and then you have Superman, right? And Supergirl.
Yeah.
And Flash is somewhere in the middle. He's very upbeat, positive, but he has his brooding moments later in the series. And again, I'm talking about the TV version. Please don't crucify me if you're like a huge comic book fan and the TV show isn't accurate to the comic book version. And then the Marvel characters, there are some of those who are very brooding as well. Hawkeye becomes really brooding at some point during, and again, I'm talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I haven't read all the comics. Please don't crucify me. So without giving, huge spoilers for, I'm sure most people have watched these movies, but if you haven't, Hawkeye becomes brooding at some point during the series of movies, if he wasn't already. And the Hulk is very brooding at various points in the series. Both versions, the Edward Norton version and the reincarnated version with.
Yeah. He's the Hulk, not the Hulk.
And Iron Man isn't exactly brooding, but he at certain points, yes, he does. It's not like a core character trait. He tends to be more sarcastic and kind of I don't even know really how to, maybe flippant. Yeah. He tends to sort of make light of his issues with like dry humor, but there's brooding beneath that. So that becomes more apparent at different points in the series.
Yeah.
So.
And then the other TV show that we talked about was, and this is gonna age me for sure, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
My husband loves that show. Yeah.
Yeah. Because in the beginning it was, Angel was the brooding hero because he's the vampire who got a soul. And now, all the murderous things he did in the past have come back to haunt him, which makes, I suppose that would make anybody a little bit angsty. And then later in the series, it was Spike who became sort of the hero and the brooding, pathetically trailing after Buffy for the last couple of seasons, sort of hero in the end of that series. And it is available on Amazon. I saw it was like highlighted, like, you might like this show. And I was like, I did like that show when I was like 19.
Yeah, my husband watched it when he was younger as well, and then a few years ago we actually like rewatched the whole series together. And it was interesting for me because I had never really watched the whole thing. I had watched an episode here and there when it was on after school, but it was never something that I had like consistently watched. So it was almost like watching for the first time for me because I was like, oh, this is what's happening. It's an intriguing show.
Yeah.
It definitely has a lot of markers of the era in which it was created, but it's an intriguing show.
Yes, definitely dates me, but oh well.
So
back then.
So I think there's a lot of examples from TV shows, and we talked about books a little bit ago. But I think the reason these characters are endearing or likable or effective as characters has a lot to do with the dynamic between like the reader or the viewer and the character sympathizing with the character. But also I think it's about the drama and the tension, which can't really be when you're plotting a story or you're planning a story is like one of the most important things. I'm always looking for ways to make sure that I'm building the tension in the story, which readers say they hate, but without that they would get bored, right? So
everybody telling you about their life, yeah.